Welcome to section 6, part 1. In this section, we will go and look into the processes individually. In this section, we will look into the starting up a project process, the directing a project process, the initiating a project process, and the controlling a stage process. We begin with the starting up a project process, or SU in short. Note that these acronyms are not official from Axelos, but these are commonly used in organizations. For each process, we will cover the purpose, the objectives, the context or the situation for that process, and related activities. Note that the list of activities is not in scope for the exam syllabus, for the foundation exam, for any of the processes. The purpose of the starting up a project process is to answer the question, do we have a worthwhile and viable project? Before embarking on a project journey, it is important to understand whether the investment is worth it or not. And that's the purpose of this process. The project mandate or the trigger from the corporate level is usually the only document that exists when this process starts. And this is not enough information for the project board to make the decision to start the initiation stage. More information is required to decide the start of the project. For example, sufficient planning overview, resourcing and allocation of key roles and responsibilities. Imagine starting a project without deciding who is the project sponsor and who is the project manager, etc. Therefore, this process prevents the starting up of poorly thought about projects. This process should be brief, doing the minimum necessary just to decide if the project is worth initiating. While the purpose of the starting up a project process is to check whether the project is worth investing and is it worthwhile and viable, the objectives are several. The objectives are to ensure the following: business justification for the project initiation. Note that this is not the business justification for the entire project, but only for the initiation, meaning the justification to do the planning. This is called the outline business case. The SU process also ensures that the required authorities exist to initiate the project and those who will perform initiation work and key project management roles. For example, it will be essential to appoint a project executive, the senior user, maybe a senior supplier, project manager, chain authority, project assurance, project support. It is okay if some of them are not appointed because it may take more time to appoint these people. Also ensure that sufficient information exists, such as project brief, to define and confirm the project scope later. The project brief includes the project product description, which is basically a clear understanding from the customer as to what they are expecting in their hand. This process also ensures the planning of the project initiation work, meaning it should be clear in the starting up a project process as to what exactly will be achieved in the initiation stage. For example, in the initiation stage, it should be known that the project planning will be performed, the PID will be developed, and so on. And those will be described in the initiation stage plan, which is developed in the starting up a project process. The starting up a project process also performs the selection of the project approach based on various ways possible. Project approach has several meanings. One of them could mean whether this is going to be a waterfall, traditional predictive approach, or an agile, incremental, evolving, iterative approach. Another example of a project approach could be whether the product is going to be homegrown or outsourced, or will the product be purchased and then improved, or are there any special considerations such as information security, data privacy, and so on. In this process, time is not wasted to initiate a project with unsound assumptions about scope, timescales, acceptance criteria, and constraints. Which means that if the starting up is not performed, then there is a danger of initiating a project or doing detailed planning without understanding whether the project is worth investing and viable or not. Therefore, the starting up a project process saves time by doing a brief check on whether the project is worth investing and viable. In the starting up a project process, any constraints should also be clearly understood and removed. For example, there may be resource constraints, funding constraints, and if there are such constraints, if it is possible to remove them, then only the initiation should be authorized. Otherwise, the initiation would not be authorized. We look at the context or the situation in which the starting up a project process works. The project mandate is given by the commissioning authority, such as the corporate program management or customer. This mandate or trigger may be in the form of a feasibility study, a concept proposal, a request for proposal RFP, or a terms of reference or TOR. This mandate should have information to identify the executive, meaning while the mandate may mention a certain opportunity or a challenge faced by the organization, such as lack of revenues or lack of profit or a risk of going bankrupt if revenues are not increased, to minimum, the mandate should have some information to identify the executive. For example, there may be some skills listed on who should be the executive, or maybe the challenge indirectly indicates what kind of executive should be appointed. For example, if the challenge is in a banking environment, then probably someone who has banking experience and a knowledge of financial and business management should be appointed as the executive. The mandate is refined to create the project brief, which is used by the project board to decide whether to initiate the project or not. The project brief includes the outline business case, the project description or a background, and the project product description, among other things. And even the project level tolerances. A good startup prevents or reduces issues, replanning, and exceptions during the project later on. The activities which occur within the starting up a project process. Note that the activities are out of the exam syllabus for the foundation exam, but they are applicable for the practitioner exam. Nevertheless, let us quickly look into these activities so that you have a better understanding of what happens in the starting up a project process. Appointing the executive and the project manager, capturing the previous lessons, designing and appointing the project management team, preparing the outline business case, selecting the project approach and assembling the project brief, and planning the initiation stage.